Welcome to the pre-concert portion of Cello Masterworks. My name is Brian Current, and I am the co-artistic director of NMC, along with founding artistic director Robert Aiken. Tonight's program brings you classic solo cello repertoire of the late 20th century, and some of the most demanding of the cello repertoire. The concert begins with a recent piece by the fantastic Canadian composer Taylor Brook. I think that you will agree that his piece holds its own amongst the illustrious company on the program. Taylor now lives in Victoria, where he joined us via Zoom and we chatted about his work.
So first, it was actually written in Smithers, BC. So it was actually written up in the sort of the northern Rockies of BC. And I only mentioned that over New York because I feel like there was some influence of that. And also, I've just had a very I've had a very good time composing when I'm up there. So this is where my spouse's family's from, and whenever I'm up there, I find it actually very easy to compose. And so I've written, I think 2 or 3 solo pieces, and it always seems to be solo pieces when I'm up there. So yeah, it's a place it in Canadiana over New York, even though I've been living in New York mostly. And then in terms of the piece itself, sort of beyond the program notes, which talks a lot about the collaboration with the person who commissioned it, Elliot Carter. And I think musically, what's maybe what I was exploring there is to create a kind of compositional duet through extreme orchestration with the solo instrument. So it begins with very, very high harmonics on the G string principally. And so that's up above the treble clef in terms of the resultant pitches. And then that's juxtaposed with the lowest octave being played. And the two sort of, there ends up being a dialogue between these two, sort of these two characters, let's say. And then towards the end, they sort of merge into one thing. But this sort of extreme juxtaposition, I'd say, is, I guess, what I find most interesting when I'm listening to it at this point.
I think that those high harmonics at the beginning are very beautiful, and the way you've written them really they suit the instrument so well in a way that you don't see very often. It's like you really got inside all these different ways that cello can play the harmonics, and it works out. I thought it works really, really well. Okay. So now it's fun to ask composers this because sometimes it's different for everybody. Sometimes, it's a gradual process, and at other times people have this eureka moment where they decide that they want to become a composer. Is there a time that you can identify where there's something you heard or something you experienced or something happened where you came online to the new music world or the composer world and said, I want to do this, I need to do this?
Right. Yeah. I have a good answer for this because there is one very strong moment. But before I say that, I think generally what kind of confirmed it was once I actually started to see what other people were composing sort of during my years as an undergrad and finally being exposed to kind of the global scene of contemporary music. That's when it was kind of confirmed. But the moment when I knew I really wanted to be a composer, I can really pinpoint it because it was a concert that was at my high school. So there was a professional string quartet came and played in my high school's library. And this was Etobicoke School of the Arts in Toronto. And I believe the string quartet was the St. Lawrence Quartet, but I could be completely wrong about that. I would love to figure it out. But in any case, they came and they played Bartók's Fourth String Quartet in the school library. And so for me, this was like a mind-blowing event because I actually hadn't really listened to much music in sort of the Western literate tradition before then. I hadn't really been exposed to much beyond popular music and folk music. And so this was really like, I can't believe music can do this. And it was just, yeah, and it made me want to explore that myself to sort of figure out how all that stuff worked. So yeah, it was a really sort of, I mean, I was already very interested in music at that point, and I was like in a band and writing music for my band and stuff like that. But this was where it sort of turned towards composition.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's a great reminder to all of us, to make sure that we as groups go and play Bartok in high school libraries, because you never know what could come out of it. An accomplished composer like Taylor Brook years down the line. So that's fantastic. Now, we like to ask this too, is because everything's changing so much, and we see different directions going in the world of composition, whether it's towards technology, whether it's towards diversity. All these are great, interesting things. Is there, where do you see the future of the art form going? It's always in a state of flux. It's a difficult question.
Yeah. I mean, that's a tough question. I think if there's one thing that I can be really sure about being able to predict in the past 4 years, it's that I can't predict anything, and that has my feeling for that has just exploded in 2020. If I try to predict, I know it'll be wrong. But and in the end, I think I do sort of follow different parts of different trends happening amongst different communities in different parts of the world, which is all very interesting in terms of what people are working on in music, and how there's a lot of sort of synthesis happening right now between different communities, between notated and non-notated traditions, and really just a lot of interesting things happening in any given part of the world. But in the end, I think I'm more and more of the mind that sort of how music develops is going to be a result of kind of how the material conditions change for everyone in the next decade, sort of like politically, economically, because I think that we're on the precipice of major changes in one way or another, and that is going to really define how music goes. Sort of, we can be interested in whatever we like, but our conditions, I think, will in the end be what really kind of push us this way or that way.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because we tell our students, we tell audiences, it's never about the notes, it's what's under the notes, what's going on in society and major world events that have influenced music in such a tangible way when we look back.
Yeah.
And who knows, what political events are going to be happening soon. We see lots of things happening now, but in retrospect, I think we'll be able to see, I hope, how this affects our music. Oh, I really like that answer.
Yeah.
And finally, we were mentioning before, we were talking about, or I was talking about how it's really remarkable how you get inside the sounds of the cello and all the possibilities of the cello. Especially with harmonics, harmonics on these instruments are really a maze, but you seem to find, your way through very, very clearly. So, so I'd like to ask how you compose generally, and how did you compose this piece called Song? Are you a cellist, or did you hang out with cellists? And how did you, find your way through this maze of a beautiful instrument?
Yeah, sure. So how I compose generally, that's difficult to answer. I think I am a bit of an old school kind of pen and paper person. I like to get my hands on the instruments that I'm working with. I like to, increasingly, I like to write pieces for specific people, or rather, I do like it, but rather I try to take more of a specific approach for specific performers when it's possible, more and more. And this is the case with the piece Song, where it was part of sort of a small group of commissions for people who had taken part in a program called the Creative Dialogue, which is between some American universities plus the Sibelius Academy, and generally takes place in either Santa Fe or in an area near Helsinki, I believe. I went to Santa Fe, and so there was a commission for short cello pieces for Antti Kartinen, who sort of runs this program, the Finnish cellist, and it was myself, Sasha de Castri, Brian Jacobs, Nina Young, and I'm thinking maybe one other person. And the idea was would be that we send him a little bit of audio, whatever we want, and he uses that to create a free improvisation, or rather a guided improvisation using the audio. And then he sends us the recording for that. And then we write our pieces, right? And, each person respectively. So I sent him a little bit of a recording of a piece I wrote for Architect Ensemble, where they're playing on tuned metal pipes. And so I sent him that, and he sent me an improvisation that was almost all cello harmonics, high cello harmonics. So this is where that comes from. And I think I write about this in the program notes a little bit, but so I could have like his particular sound in my ear when I was writing the piece. And so that was used, his improvisation was used to sort of inspire the piece that I wrote. And then in terms of sort of finding my way through the harmonics, I mean, from my point of view, that's just a matter of craft and a matter of sort of taking the time to learn it. And it does help that I can play stringed instruments in sort of a basic way. I did, violin in high school, that sort of thing. I'm not really a string player, but I can, when I'm writing for strings, I can imagine where the fingers go, which really helps, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm always fascinated by, of course, with the technical aspects of composition as well, the sort of the craft around it, and the I guess orchestration broadly. And so all those things I think went into song. But then, for another piece, it could be a very different approach. I like to keep myself on my toes, I guess. I like to try different things, take different approaches. Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I think I mentioned I feel like I listened to every solo cello piece when programming this concert, and yours just really, really leapt off the page and jumped out. And David Hetherington really loved it too. And I think our listeners are going to really love this piece too. So congratulations on your music, on this work, and keep astonishing us.
Great. Thank you. And yeah, I'm honored to be included. I hope you all enjoy the piece.
Next, as we are in our 50th anniversary season, we are looking to the future, but are also celebrating the amazing history of this organization. Because of NMC and founding artistic director Robert Aitken, Toronto has welcomed many illustrious composers, including Elliot Carter and Helmut Lachenmann. Here is David Hetherington talking about how he worked closely with these two composers on two pieces that are on tonight's program.
Well, I certainly want to express my gratitude to Bob for involving me in all these years. It's been 40 plus years that I've been working with Bob at New Music Concerts. And the biggest thing is that I've met so many excellent composers from around the world, worked with Ludoslavsky, with Henri Dutilleux, and of course, Elliot Carter, and all sorts of others that I would never have had the chance to meet if it hadn't been for Bob. So this has been the primary enjoyment of my whole involvement with New Music Concerts. And it's been very good, and also to perform with Bob. We've recorded works. On our Elliot Carter recording, he and I recorded the Enchanted Preludes, which is for flute and cello. And so I really enjoyed working with him, not only just meeting all of these composers and playing their music, but the opportunity to play with him. And we used to play Bach together as well. So this is just part of the enrichment of my musical life in any case.
What was it like to work with Helmut Lachenmann on this?
It was absolutely wonderful. He is a wonderful person. He is, he's serious about his music, but he has a fantastic sense of humor. And so he didn't mind if you were laughing while you were working on the piece, because a lot of the things are very, very, well, certainly in those days, it was composed in 1969, I believe. Nobody had ever done things like that on a cello before. He knew a lot about the cello. He played the cello himself. So it was very, very intuitive, a lot of it, really. The problem was that the techniques were so different that they had to be very, very concisely explained in the music. The only problem for me was that the explanations were all in German, and I don't speak German. And the person who translated them for me didn't know anything about music, so that gave some challenge in figuring it all out. But there were only a couple of things that I got wrong or didn't quite understand. And when he came, and we had a chance to work through the whole piece in great detail. It was really instructive, and it was very helpful to how I subsequently performed the piece.
I think what was so important when I heard it anyway is that what you were doing at the time seemed very sort of outrageous to make these sounds on the cello, but the fact that you took them so seriously and were so committed to them was what was the most powerful thing, I thought.
Yeah, and this is one of the valuable things about meeting the composer, because he was very, as I said, very serious and very, very musical. He wrote all sorts of different types of music. It wasn't all like this. And he was very, very careful to put in all the musical expressions. So the rhythmic pulse is very important in that particular piece. It has a very, very exact rests and pauses and timings and things like that, and dynamics and phrasings. And that's what we talked about a lot of the time, in addition to all the various technical things, was what the phrases meant. And I have to confess that it might not have been so clear just reading the music, especially reading in a language that I don't understand. But after a while, and after playing it a lot, I get to understand exactly. It is definitely a piece of music with phrasings, ups and downs, and definitely lots of contrasts. As you know, it goes from the almost totally inaudible, rather visual effects to really, really violently loud crunching sound.
What's amazing too is that he invented his own notation to create these sounds. So there's instructions, but also these drawings and a kind of new kind of musical notation up and down the neck of the cello. And it seems very, very precise what he wanted.
Yeah, and he's a very precise person. He knew exactly how to make all of these sounds. As I said, he played the cello. And if you didn't follow them closely, then you might get a very different sound than what he intended. But when looking back after learning the piece and looking back at the instructions, it all makes perfect sense what he wrote. Although it was a little difficult to figure it out right at the beginning, that's for sure.
Well, let's move over to Elliot Carter too, who is on this program. And because of Robert Aiken, founding artistic director of New Music Concerts, and his relationship with Carter, Toronto has been something of a second home to Elliot Carter over the years, and has been here for many concerts. And he also worked with you on the solo cello piece that you performed. What is it like to work with him on that?
Well, that was also very, very interesting. I didn't get that much time with him because he would only arrive the day or two before the actual performances. But as you said, he'd been in Toronto lots of times because of his close relationship with Bob Aiken. I'm forever grateful for Bob for giving me the opportunity to play so much of his music, and for him as well. So when he came, of course, you'd be up on the stage and he'd be in the audience with a score in front of him, and you would play away wondering what's he going to say, because he's definitely an iconic world composer. And here's his little old me in Toronto trying to play this intensely difficult piece. And he was very clear about a lot of the things he wrote. He was incredibly meticulous in his notation. He was sort of the famous father of metric modulation and rhythms and things like that. And so you tried desperately to play everything exactly as he wrote it, including his metronome markings. And then when I got to play it for him, he would sort of look at me quizzically and say, well, why are you doing that? Why is that so fast? Well, wait a minute, that's exactly the way you wrote it, I thought. And then the most important thing was that I found out that he just wanted his music to be played beautifully and expressively. And whatever you needed to do to make it work was fine with him. And it was really funny once when I was playing for him the Figment 2, he mentioned, there's that passage in bar such and such that, you should be playing much more out and expressively. And in contrast to the other things, I said, well, pardon me for pointing it out to Master Carter, but you did write triple piano senza espressione just above that passage. And so he laughed. He says, well, it's been a while since I wrote it, you know, and I am 100 years old, so I don't remember everything. But that just showed he was listening to how I was playing it in the moment and was reacting to how the music was being performed. And at that particular moment, he thought this is the way it should be, and he was right. But so I've really looked upon his music, and I must say a lot of composers' music, with a different eye, because now I realize that I know lots of composers who would agree with me, perhaps you would too, that sure, do everything that I asked for, but please make it your own piece, and if something needs to be made expressive by doing something other than what I wrote, then go ahead.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that we're learning more and more that Carter's music is an expressive music and not just, you know, just note crunching, even though it's like so difficult.
Yeah, well, it looks as if you need to do everything exactly as he wrote it.
Right.
But I must admit, often composers will write something in Italian at the top to sort of indicate how they would like their piece to be played, and he did exactly that. And the word he wrote was flessibile, you know, be flexible. Right. And at the outset, I didn't take that seriously enough. Now, I love to be flexible in his pieces. Some people might be a little bit alarmed that I'm not following the instructions that he has there.
Now, you mentioned that Lachenmann was, or is, a cellist, or played the cello. Does it make a big difference if the composer is a cellist? I'm thinking about the Domenga, which is all these amazing techniques and effects for cello that really you have to know intimately the instrument to create these. Does it make a big difference? And can you talk about the Domenga a little bit in this regard?
Right. Well, the Domenga piece, which we pronounce probably inaccurately as Ifu, is just a shortening of Emanuel Forman's name. And he was an absolutely fabulous cellist in the first part of the 20th century. And he was living in Europe at the time. And so they've got this competition, a cello competition in his honor. And so Thomas Domenga was asked to write this piece as the compulsory contemporary work in the competition, which is often done. Learned a piece by Penderecki called Violoncello Totale, which was intended for the Tchaikovsky competition several years ago. And that was sort of the same thing. It was all sort of technical things that the cellist is supposed to show their stuff, as well as their ability to understand contemporary composition. In Domenga's case, ironically, he was the one for whom Carter wrote Figment 1. And because Carter used to be accused of writing music that was not idiomatic for whatever the instrument was, the cello being one of those. And some of the writing is just intensely difficult because he clearly didn't care how difficult it was going to be. You know, he could have written it a little bit differently and made it easier for us. But he said, you know, and Bob Aiken was having one of these chats with Elliot, and he asked him that question: why do you do that? And it's not like he didn't know the instrument. And he said, well, you know, I used to worry about that. He says, but my works are almost always played by virtuoso cellists, and they always find a way. So I just stopped worrying about it, and I just write whatever notes that I want to write, and let them worry about how they get to be played. In Domenga's case, of course, being a brilliant cellist and teacher, the purposes of the composition was to be in a competition. So he wrote it for cellists, and a lot of the stuff you wouldn't write for any other instrument, and we appreciate it a lot. That didn't make the piece much easier. Like saying Franz Liszt is idiomatic for the piano, so it must be easy to play. Well, not. And so he, and not only that, he recorded the piece himself, so there's no question about how he wants it to be played. And he also put a tutorial on YouTube to explain to the contestants how various passages were to be played, because he knew that they were difficult, and the notation, it's not so much that the actual doing of the passage is all that difficult. It's just that you have to understand the notation that is used to describe it, because there is no standard notation for some of these effects. So he felt he was duty bound to explain it. So he's definitely a detail person. All of the, you could just, it's like writing, playing some of the David Popper etudes. Everything lies within the hand. You know exactly what fingerings you should be using to do this, because you know how he would be doing it. And then you could watch him do it. I mean, how many times have we said about a composer, you know, can you show me how to play this? You know, it's rather cynically. In his case, no question, he could play it better than anyone. And so you knew that thing had to be played a certain way, and that made it sort of easier to understand how the piece should be going.
Great. Hey, well, this has all been so great and so informative. And it's rare that we get you to do a pre-concert chat with us at the same time as you would go on to do a whole show.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do this right before I play.
No, usually you'd be getting your head in the game. So thank you so much for not only this chat, but for putting together this amazing program, which I think will be historic in the cello world, for just the amount of repertoire you went piece after piece after piece in a solo performance. And we couldn't be more grateful that you did this show for us. So thank you so much, David.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience, and it was definitely my COVID project for the summer.
Thank you again to the amazing David Hetherington for his outstanding delivery of this truly wonderful music, which you will hear shortly. For more information and program notes, please visit newmusicconcerts.com, where you can follow us on social media and keep up with our latest news. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you soon for the show.